Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Shri Guru Pranama Prayers Ki Jai. Om Aganyat Dhimirandasya Yananjana Salakaya Chaksurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manubhishtam Sapitam Yena Bhutali Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Jitaha Pajikamalan Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahaguna Ragunatam Dvitam Tam Sajivam Saidvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahaguna Lalita Shri Vishaka Nivitam Cha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namini Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paskatya Desatarine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Tinamini Shri Varsavanavi Devi Dayitaya Kripabdaye Krishna Sambandha Vijnana Dayane Prabhave Namaha Madhur Ujvala Premadya Shri Rupa Nuga Bhakti Da Shri Gora Karuna Shakti Vigrahaya Namostate Namaste Gauravani Shri Murtaye Dinatarine Rupa Nuga Virudapa Apasiddhanta Dvantaharine Namo Gora Kishoraya Sakshad Vairagya Murtaye Vipralambara Sambodhe Padambujayate Namaha Namo Bhakti Vinodaya Satchitanandanamine Gora Shakti Swarupaya Rupanugavarayate Goravir Bhava Bhumestvam Nirdesta Sajjana Priya Vaishnava Sarvabhaumashri Jaganatayate Namaha Vanchakalpaturabhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyeva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Padayate Krishna Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gurachase Namaha Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakam Namami Bhakta Saktikam He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Chayatam Surator Bangor Mama Manda Mater Gati Matsarva Swapadambojo Radha Madana Mohano Divyad Vindaranya Kalpradumadaha Shrimad Ratnagara Simhasanastito Shrimad Radha Shila Govinda Devo Prastali Bihi Sevyamano Smarami Shiman Rasa Rasarambi Vamsivata Tatastita Karsan Venuswanir Gulpir Gopinatak Striyestuna Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavaneswari Rishabhanustute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasti Gaur Bhakta Vrindam Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Shri Guru Pranama Prayers Ki Jai Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So today we're going to continue now back to the Srimad Bhagvatam, Canto 2 and Chapter 9 and text number 34. This is the second verse of the 4 nutshell verses of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Rite ritam yat pratyeta na pratyeta chatmani tadvidyad atmano mayam yata baso yata tama. Rite, without, artam, value, yat, that which, pratyeta, appears to be, na, not, pratyeta, appears to be, cha, and atmani, in relation to me, tat, that, vidyat, you must know, atmana, my, mayam, illusory energy, yata, just as, abhasa, the reflection, yata, as, tama, the darkness. O Brahma, whatever appears to be of value, if it is without relation to me, has no reality. Know it as my illusory energy that reflection which appears to be in darkness. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. In the previous verse, it has already been concluded that in any stage of the cosmic manifestation, its appearance, its sustenance, its growth, its interactions of different energies, its deterioration, and its disappearance, all has its basic relation with the existence of the personality of Godhead. And as such, whenever there is forgetfulness of this prime relation with the Lord, and whenever things are accepted as real without being related to the Lord, that conception is called a product of the illusory energy of the Lord. Because nothing could exist without the Lord, it should be known that the illusory energy is also an energy of the Lord. The right conclusion of dovetailing everything in relationship with the Lord is called Yoga Maya, or the energy of union, and the wrong conception of detaching a thing from its relationship with the Lord is called the Lord's Daivi Maya, or Mahamaya. Both the Mayas also have connections with the Lord, because nothing can exist without being related to Him. As such, the wrong conception of detaching relationships from the Lord is not false, but illusory. Wow, there's a big difference between false and illusion. So, the fact that the material scientists want to separate everything from God or Krishna, so that's a false. It's not false. It's a fact that they're doing that. But what they end up with is something illusory, accepting something that is not what they think it is, accepting something to be not what it actually is. That's called an illusion. Now, what's the difference between a mistake and an illusion? Well, a mistake is to see something and think it's something other than what it is. But when you're convinced that it's something that what it is not, that's called an illusion. So the mistake is mistake of seeing or hearing. That happens quite frequently. But when you actually believe that it is something different than what it is and act like that, that's called an illusion. Okay. So then Prabhupada continues. Misconceiving one thing for another thing is called illusion. Now somebody might say, oh, that sounds like a mistake. Well, the mistake is thinking something is different than something else. But when you're convinced that it's something else than what it actually is, that's an illusion. And then when you act like that, you're acting in a state of delusion. Therefore, the wrong conception of accepting this material manifestation as being divorced from the energy of the Lord is illusion, but it is not false. Yeah, if you see people walking around saying, well, the material creation has nothing to do with God, there's no God, it's all mythology. We just rely on science and reason and logic, and we don't, because we can't see or measure God, it's not factored into what we're seeing. Okay, very good. But that can be a fact, not a fact, but that can be something false that they are convinced of. So it's not false, because they're actually acting like that, and they're actually saying these things. So that's real, what they're saying, but it's illusory because it's not true. The fact that they write books trying to prove that God has nothing to do with material creation, that God doesn't exist, blah, 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 blah. You can't say it's false because they print the books and they give lectures on it. But it's illusory. Misconceiving one thing for another thing is called illusion. So, if you say, I am this body, that means that you're accepting the body as the self. So, that is an illusion. It's not true. But you're convinced it's true. So you're acting, you're believing something that's illusory. Now, is it false? No, because you walk around and tell people all the time, I don't believe there's a God, I don't believe in God, blah, blah, blah. So the fact that you don't believe in God is not false. You can't say it's false because you're talking about it all the time, but it's an illusion. Right? Because you're accepting something you're accepting something that is not, that it is not. You're accepting something to be something that it is not. In other words, misconceiving one thing for another thing is called illusion. For example, accepting a rope as a snake is illusion, but the rope is not false. The rope, as it exists in the front of the illusion person, is not at all false, but the acceptance is illusory. Therefore, the wrong conception of accepting this material manifestation as being divorced from the energy of the Lord is illusion, but it is not false. This illusory conception is called the reflection of the reality in the darkness of ignorance. Well, you might say, oh, wait a minute. How can there be a reflection when there's darkness? Well, that's in the following example of that is when you see the shadow of your hand or your body. So that shadow is in darkness, right? It says a shadow. There's darkness because you're blocking, your body is blocking the sunlight somewhat, and therefore you see a shadow of your body. So that is a reflection in darkness, or a shadow reflection in darkness. So this is also explained in the book called Dialectic Spiritualism, when it talks about Leibniz. Leibniz was a German mathematician and philosopher. And he so Prabhupada talks about him. He lived between 1646 and 1716. And so Prabhupada writes, the bewildered spirit soul, under the influence of the three modes of material nature, thinks himself to be the doer of activities which are in actuality carried out by nature. And then Prabhupada quotes Bhagavad-Gita, 3rd chapter, 27th verse. Prakriti kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvasahankarai vimudatma kartaham iti manyate. So the bewildered spirit soul, under the influence of the three modes of material nature, thinks himself to be the doer of activities which are in actuality carried out by nature. And then Prabhupada writes, Prakriti, the material nature, is controlling the living entity by her different modes, But in ignorance, the living entity is thinking, I am inventing, I am acting, I am progressing. This is called Maya, or illusion. No one can progress or improve without Krishna consciousness. The living entities have come into this material world because they wanted to imitate Krishna. Therefore, they have been given a chance to engage in so-called enjoyment. At the same time, Krishna is so kind that he has given them the Vedas, the right directions. He says, all right, if you want to enjoy, enjoy in this way, so that one day you may come back to me. So if you follow the Vedic instructions, you can have, in a lower level, sense gratification. It's called the Karma Kanda section of the Vedas. You can achieve sense gratification by following Krishna's instructions. But that is not the goal of life. But that's just to appease temporarily the misguided desires of the living entity. But they're achieving their misguided desires by following the Vedas. Okay. But if there are genuine sadhus present, and brahmanas, genuine brahmana sadhus, then they can gradually help the illusioned person understand that sense gratification is not the goal of life. There's a much greater goal, and the whole purpose of material creation is to help the fallen souls go back to Godhead, where they came from and where they belong. So that happens in several ways. One is by following the Vedas, and two is by not following the Vedas and just engaging in sense gratification. One gets the sense gratification, but one is punished also. And that is Durga's Mata's job. She punishes. First she gives sense gratification to the living entity, and then she punishes them and takes it away. And it's devastating. So, therefore, no one can progress or improve without Krishna consciousness. The living entities have come into the material world because they wanted to imitate Krishna. Therefore, they have been given a chance to engage in so-called enjoyment. At the same time, Krishna is so kind that he has given them the Vedas, the right directions. He says, all right, if you want to enjoy, enjoy in this way, so that one day you may come back to me. If a child insists on acting improperly, the father may be very careful in giving him what he wants, and at the same time directing him. There are two kinds of activities. One is pavriti, by which we become very much attached to the material world. By the other type of activity, nivriti, we become detached. Both activities are mentioned in the Vedas. However, there is a plan, because the living entities have forgotten or disobeyed Krishna and are trying to enjoy by imitating him. They are placed into this material world under the supervision of the superintendent of this material world, Durga. These living entities can return home back to Godhead. That is the plan. And there is really no other. Every one of us has to go back home, back to Godhead. If we do so immediately and voluntarily, we save time. Otherwise, we waste time. We have to come to this point. Therefore, Bhagavad-Gita says, Bahunam Janmanamante, Bhagavad-Gita 7:19. After struggling for many births, the wise man surrenders unto Krishna. The final point is surrender. And Maya gives the living entity trouble in many different ways, so that he will eventually come to this point. When he becomes frustrated in his attempts at sense gratification, it should be understood that he is receiving special favor. When Krishna is anxious to reform the living entity, he bestows his mercy by first of all taking away all his money. This is a special favor. The living entity always wants to delay, but by special favor, Krishna draws the living entity to him by force. This is explained in Chaitanya Charitamrita. The living entity wants Krishna or God, but at the same time he wants to enjoy the material world. This is inconsistent because desiring God means rejecting the material world. Sometimes the living entity is caught between these two desires, and when Krishna sees this, he places him in a hopeless condition. He takes away all his money, and then the living entity sees that all his so-called relatives and friends turn from him, saying, "Oh, this man is useless. He has no money." In this hopeless condition, the living entity surrenders to Krishna. So, this is an amazing explanation by Srila Prabhupada, and I'll continue some more. All beings are trying to be happy in this material world, but it is nature's plan to give them trouble. In other words, every attempt at happiness will be frustrated, so that eventually the living entity will turn to Krishna. This is the plan, to bring the living entity back home, back to Godhead. This plan does not apply to just a few living entities. It is not that some will remain here and others will go back to Godhead. No. The whole plan is that everyone must come back to Godhead. Some living entities are very obstinate, just like bad boys. The father says, "Come on," but the boy says, "No, I will not go." It is then the father's business to drag him. At the end of Bhagavad-Gita, Krishna says, "Sarvaguya tamam bhuya shrinu me paramam vacha istosti me drita iti tat drita iti tat tato vakshami tehitam." Because you are my very dear friend, I am speaking to you the most confidential part of knowledge. Hear this from me, for it is for your benefit. 1864. Then Krishna says, "Surrender unto me, sarvadharmam parityaja, mamekam saranam vraja, aham tvam sarvapapebhyo mokshisami ma sucha." Surrender unto me, and I will give you all protection. Bhagavad-Gita 1866. In Bhagavad-Gita, Krishna instructed Arjuna in karma yoga, jnana yoga, and other yogas, but his final instruction was to surrender. Okay, so this is an amazing explanation by Prabhupada. He explains the role of, he explains poverty and nivriti. Poverty is those activities by which we become attached to the material nature or the material world. And nivriti are those activities by which we become detached from the material world. So both activities are mentioned in the Vedas. But there is a plan. Krishna has a plan. What's the plan? Because the living entities have forgotten him and disobeyed his orders, and trying to enjoy by imitating what Krishna does. Therefore, they're put in the material world under the supervision of Durga Mata. And what does Durga Mata do? Well, she's going to train them not to stay in the material world, but to want to actually go back to Godhead. And everyone is going to go back to Godhead eventually. Some people take a very, 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 very long time, and other people will do it rather quickly. It all depends how much you suffer in the material world. When someone is really suffering, they'll do something that they never thought of doing before. Coming to the Hare Krishna temple and finding out why they're suffering and see if there's a solution to it. That happens often. People come here completely bewildered, and they're looking to get help and solace by talking to a genuine bhakta. Okay. So Prabhupada quoted these two verses, Sarvaguya Tamam Bhuya Shrinu me Paramam Vacha Istosti me Dridam iti Tato Vakshami te hitam. And that is that, hey Arjuna, because you are my very dear friend, I am speaking to you the most confidential part of knowledge. What is the most confidential part of knowledge? That is surrendering to Krishna completely and following his instructions. Manmana bhava mad bhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru mam evaisi satyante pratijane priyosime. Always think of me, Arjuna. Become my devotee. Worship me and offer your homage and love, respect to me. And Manmana bhava mad bhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru mam evaishyasi satyam te. I promise you, if you do this, I promise you, pratijani priyosmi, that you become very dear to me and you will come back to me. And then he says, Sarvadharma pratyaja mami kam saranam rajaham tom sarvapapipyo moksisyami mahasuchaha. He says, abandon all types of religiosity and just surrender unto me, and only unto me. And if you do this, and if you do this, then I will protect you. Therefore, you have nothing to fear or hesitate for and to doubt. Just surrender unto me. So, this is the ultimate instruction of Krishna. This is the most confidential knowledge. And if we surrender to Krishna, he will protect us personally. Okay. So, therefore, it says here, coming back to Canto 2, Chapter 9, Text 34, and we're in the second paragraph. Misconceiving one thing for another is called illusion. For example, accepting a rope as a snake is illusion, but the rope is not false. The rope, as it exists in the front of the illusion person, is not at all false, but the acceptance is illusory. Therefore, the wrong conception of accepting this material manifestation as being divorced from the energy of the Lord is illusion, but it is not false. And this illusory conception is called the reflection of the reality in the darkness of ignorance. So what does Prabhupada do in this phrase? And this illusory conception is called the reflection of the reality in the darkness of ignorance. Okay, so basically there's several dimensions to this statement. He's comparing the reflection of something in darkness. Well, the silhouette of your body, when you turn your back to the sun, you see the silhouette, or you see the form of your body in darkness, in the shade. But that's one dimension. The second dimension is he considers that shady reflection of your body, because you turn your back to the sun, so you see a shade it's in the form of your body. He calls that a reflection in ignorance. Reflection of the reality in the darkness of ignorance. So not only there's a shadow, but he goes further and says that that shadow is ignorance, because you're making a big mistake. You're accepting or misconceiving the material manifestation as being divorced from the energy of the Lord. And this is an illusion. but it's not false. And this illusory conception is called the reflection of the reality in the darkness of ignorance. Anything that appears as apparently not being produced out of my energy, Krishna says, is called Maya. So Maya is an illusion. The conception that the living entity is formless, or that the Supreme Lord is formless, is also illusion. In the Bhagavad-Gita 2.12, it is said by the Lord in the midst of the battlefield that the warriors standing in front of Arjuna himself, and even the Lord, had all existed before. They were existing on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, and they would all continue to be individual personalities in the future also, even after the annihilation of the present body, and even after being liberated from the bondage of material existence. So you cannot destroy the individual personality of the living entity. It's eternal. In all circumstances, the Lord and the living entities are individual personalities, and the personal features of both the Lord and the living beings are never abolished. Only the influence of the illusory energy, the reflection of light in the darkness, can, by the mercy of the Lord, be removed. In the material world, the light of the sun is also not independent, nor is that of the moon. The real source of light is the Brahma Jyoti, which diffuses light from the transcendental body of the Lord, and the same light is reflected in varieties of light: the light of the sun, the light of the moon, the light of fire, or the light of electricity. So the identity of the self is being unconnected with the Supreme Self, the Lord. So the identity of the self as being unconnected with the Supreme Self, the Lord, is also illusion. And the false claim, I am the Supreme, is the last illusory snare of the same Maya, or the external energy of the Lord. Wow, big statements by Prabhupada here. Yeah, so this is also explained. There's more information of what Durga does. And I'm going to read that also because it's very important that we understand. It says, Srila Prabhupada, all the laws of nature are working under Krishna's directions. Mayadaksena Prakriti Suyatesa Characharan Hetunanena Konteya Jagat Viparipartate. This material nature is working under my direction, O son of Kunti, and it is producing all moving and non-moving beings. By its rule, this manifestation is created and annihilated again and again. This Bhagavad-Gita 9:10. Material nature, Prabhupada says now, is the goddess Durga. It is she who is the superintendent of the fort meaning the prison. Material nature is like a fort which no one can leave. So the material nature is the prison. Durga is the confidential maidservant of Krishna, but she is very thankless. But she has a very thankless task of punishing the demoniac living entities who are thinking, I will worship my mother Durga, not knowing that her engagement is punishment. Wow. Just the other day I did a program at somebody's house, and they wanted me to see their altar. So I walked into that little room where the altar was, and there's a gigantic picture of Durga Mata. And this person is a friend of mine, but I don't see him very much. So they invited me to do this program after many years. And I said, okay. Anyway, later on this person told me that he had a serious heart attack and he almost died. So this is what happens when one is worshiping Mother Durga. they have many material desires, so they're able to satisfy a lot of those desires by the mercy of Mother Durga. But Durga's real purpose is punishment. So first she awards things, and then she takes them away, either slowly or abruptly, and it's devastating to the person. It's a type of punishment. This is not understood by most Hindus. And there are many, many Hindus that are worshipping Durga Mata, but yet they're subjected to all kinds of suffering. And they do also get material benefits, but then those benefits will be taken away from them, and it causes tremendous suffering and stress. So Durga is the confidential maidservant of Krishna, but she has a very thankless task of punishing the demoniac living entities who are thinking, I will worship my mother Durga, not knowing that her engagement is punishment. She is not an ordinary mother. She gives the demonic living entity whatever he wants. Give me money. Give me a good wife. Give me reputation. Give me strength. So, Dhanam dehi, Janam dehi, Rupam dehi. Give me all these things, a nice body, and a nice wife, a nice house, a nice car. Goddess Durga says, all right, take these things, but at the same time you will be frustrated with them. On the one hand, the living entity is given whatever he wants, and on the other hand, there is frustration and punishment. This is nature's law. Wow, look at that. Nature's law? This is a law of nature? Hey, we've been saying that for a long time because it's in the Bhagavad-Gita also. In the 5th chapter, 22nd verse. Let's see what it says. The 5th chapter, 22nd verse. In verse it says, therefore those who are true yogis or learned transcendentalists are not attracted by sense pleasures, which are the causes of continuous material existence. The more one is addicted to material pleasures, the more he is entrapped by material miseries. There it is. The more one is addicted to material pleasures, the more he is entrapped by material miseries. And this is also explained further in the 3rd chapter, 39th verse of Bhagavad-Gita, where it says, therefore, this lust is the symbol of ignorance, by which the living entity is kept within the material world. While one enjoys sense gratification, it may be that there is some feeling of happiness, but actually that so-called feeling of happiness is the ultimate enemy of the sense enjoyer. Whoa. Yeah. The ultimate enemy. That's terrible. But yet, that's what's happening. So this is the law of nature. If one is addicted to material pleasure, the more that person is entrapped by material miseries. And let's take a look at another verse. 3rd chapter, 43rd verse. Let's see what that says. It says, in the material existence of life, one is certainly influenced by propensities for lust and desire for dominating the resources of material nature. Desire for overlording and for sense gratification is the greatest enemy of the conditioned soul. But by the strength of Krishna consciousness, one can control the material senses, the mind, and the intelligence. Okay, so this desire for overlording and for sense gratification is the greatest enemy of the conditioned soul. Oh my God. everybody is into this overlording and sense gratification. Let's see what else. In the 3rd canto, 25th chapter, 13th verse, Srila Prabhupada writes, as soon as we get some material happiness, there is also material distress. This is the law of the material world. Okay. And then in the 1st canto, 7th chapter, 29th verse of Srimad Bhagvatam, Prabhupada writes, the jiva, or the individual soul, is unable to enjoy in the material world. Whoa. So, recently, there was a sleepover at somebody's house. And after a couple of days, some of the people that did the sleepover, they ended up with COVID, and they're now convalescing, and they're sequestered, or they're what you call not able to function normally. So, therefore, whenever we do something for our own personal enjoyment, independent of Krishna, we fall into a trap of Durga Mata. And what does she do? She punishes. So first she gives sense gratification, then she punishes. Or as it says here, as soon as we get some material happiness, there is also material distress. And let's take a look at the 7th chapter, 16th verse. What does it say there? Everything, of course, is in the Bhagavad-Gita. 7th chapter, 16th verse. It says, one second. As long as such a purified stage is not attained, devotees in transcendental service to the Lord are tainted with fruitive activities, the search for mundane knowledge, etc. So one has to transcend all this before one can come to the stage of pure devotional service. So their service is tainted with fruitive activities. And what happens? You get punished by the laws of nature. We don't realize that there are laws of nature, just like the law of gravity and the law of thermodynamics. And there's a law of nature that if we engage in sense gratification, we suffer. And that even if one is a devotee, but the service that one is performing is tainted with fruitive activities, then and the search for mundane knowledge, both the transcendental service to the Lord is tainted with fruitive activities, and the search for mundane knowledge, then one will suffer. One will be punished by Durga. Wow, it's terrible. Okay. Therefore, continuing, I'm going to continue that what I was reading in the dialectic spiritualism. Prabhupada says, Goddess Durga says, all right, take these things, but at the same time you will be frustrated with them. On the one hand, the living entity is given whatever he wants, and on the other, there is frustration and punishment. This is nature's law, and nature is functioning under the instructions of Krishna. The living entity in the material world has revolted against Krishna. He wants to imitate Krishna and become the enjoyer. Therefore, Krishna gives him all the resources of material enjoyment, but at the same time, he punishes him. The goddess Durga is so powerful that she can create, maintain, and dissolve, but she is working just like a shadow. A shadow does not move independently. The movement is coming from Krishna. A fool thinks that the material nature is there for his enjoyment. This is the materialistic view. When he sees a flower, he thinks, nature has produced this flower for me. Everything is for me. In the Bible, it is stated that animals are placed under the dominion or protection of men. But men mistakenly think they are given to us to kill and eat. If I entrust you to someone, is it proper that he eat you? What kind of intelligence is this? This is all due to a lack of Krishna consciousness. Whoa. Prabhupada just threw a big bomb at the false followers of Jesus Christ, not the real followers. So, he does say, in the Bible, in the Old Testament, it does say that after the flood, where God flooded the world, but saved Noah and his sons, and they also saved two of each type of species in a big boat, Noah's Ark. And it floated for a long time, and everybody died except Noah and his sons and their wives. And when the waters receded, the ark, or this gigantic boat, landed on top of Mount Ararat, which is in Armenia, or used to be in Armenia, but then after World War I, right at the border of Armenia is Mount Ararat, but Mount Ararat, most of it is in Turkey right now. So anyway, it landed there, and then eventually Noah and his sons and their wives and all these animals and I guess insects and all kinds of living entities came down and back to the earth. And at that time, God, the God of the Bible, gave dominion to Noah and his sons over all the animals. Previous to that, they had dominion of all plants, which were offered to them as food. But after the flood, they also received dominion over all the animals. So Prabhupada is referring to that. He says, in the Bible, it is stated that animals are placed under the dominion or protection of men. But men mistakenly think they are given to us to kill and eat. If I entrust you to someone, is it proper that he eat you? What kind of intelligence is this? This is all due to a lack of Krishna consciousness. Now, the Christian, now I'm going to become the devil's advocate. I'm going to take the position of the Christian, because I am a Christian, and I've read the Bible, and I went to church, and I was baptized Christian. So the Christian said, wait a minute, your guru there is misinterpreting the Bible. And God gave dominion over the animals, and God explained that they could eat the animals. They were killed. There are certain animals, not pigs. There's a description of what kind of animals they can eat. But God said, not one drop of blood in the flesh. So therefore, the ancient Jews would kill the animals and try not to inflict too much pain. So they would cut their jugular and bleed them very quickly, so they would not feel too much pain, which is not possible. But anyway, and then they would cut up the flesh of the animal and put it in brine, B-R-I-N-E. Brine is salt water. And wait for 3 weeks or a month or more, so that they would be not sure, but relatively sure that not one drop of blood remained in the meat. So by the time they take the meat out of that brine, it's all gray, because most of the blood has been drained out. But you can't say all of it is drained out, but most of it. Because God said you take one, the soul is living in the blood, and you take one drop of the blood, you're going to be, in a sense, killing the soul or disturbing the soul. So therefore, they did not permit, or God did not permit. So now, even one drop of blood. Now, you tell me if it's possible to eat meat without one drop of blood in it. It's not possible. So it is a conundrum, a perplexing statement. So therefore, because God didn't give any rules like that for eating apples or pears or grapes or vegetables, he didn't say, I will take your life if you drink one drop of blood in the flesh. He didn't say that, I'll take your life if you eat one drop of juice in an apple. He didn't say anything like that. So therefore, it's so problematic that why should one attempt to eat meat? In other words, basically he was saying, don't eat meat. But people are so adamant, like the ancient Jews, that they tried to, if possible, eliminate as much blood in the flesh as possible so they could eat it. So these are all unfortunate things. So what Prabhupada is saying is actually true. If I entrust you to someone, is it proper that he eat you? What kind of intelligence is this? So if he gives dominion over the animals, it's to protect them. It's not to kill them and eat them. But the way he said it was that, okay, you can eat them, but not one drop of blood in the flesh. Well, that's impossible to completely, and they don't even try nowadays to do that. Even the kosher Jews, they still try and leave the meat in brine for some time. Maybe they don't even do that anymore. I don't think they do that anymore. But anyway, we can look that up. But the Christians don't do anything like that. You know, you go into the Safeway and the meat is fire engine red. So that means there's plenty of blood in the flesh. Anyway, the Christians have their way of saying, well, we have a new covenant in the New Testament, and Jesus permitted us to eat meat because he ate meat. He multiplied 4 fish and 4 loaves of bread to feed 4,000 people. So that's the proof that he ate meat. It's not the proof at all. But anyway, Prabhupada said, look, if you can multiply 4 fish and 4 loaves of bread to feed 4,000 people, then you can eat meat also. But if you can't do it, don't even think of it. And who can do that anyway? Okay, so Prabhupada continues. He says, what kind of intelligence is this? This is all due to lack of Krishna consciousness. So then, Prabhupada says, the real truth is that God has a plan, and one has to be taught that plan by one who knows it. This is explained in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Nitya Siddha Krishna Bhakti Sadhya Kabunai, Shravanadi Sudachita Koraye Udai. Pure love for Krishna is eternally established in the hearts of living entities. It is not something to be gained from another source. When the heart is purified by hearing and chanting, the living entity naturally awakens. Hearing and chanting. Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya 22.107. The truth is there, but we have forgotten it. Through the process of chanting and hearing, we can revive the truth, which is that we are eternal servants of Krishna. The living entity is good by nature because he is part and parcel of the supreme good. But due to material association, he has become conditioned. Now we have to again draw forth this goodness through the process of Krishna consciousness. Okay, so here is God's plan. God's plan is that we should all go back to Godhead in this lifetime. And it's not difficult if we simply follow God's instructions, or Krishna's instructions. Why? Because Krishna consciousness is in the heart of every living entity. And we all originally came from the spiritual world. Therefore, we can all go back again to the spiritual world if we want to. That's where we actually belong. Okay, we'll stop right there. Are there any questions? Anybody listening? Dhananjaya? He's not there. Okay, so we'll stop right there. Thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Huh? Go. Is anybody listening?
I don't know, unfortunately.
Oh.
I don't know if there's any questions.
No questions. Okay. Was anybody listening? Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakati Satma Bando Mui Savadana Mate Bando Mui Savadana Mate Janara Prasade Bai He Bhavatori Ajaye Krishna Prapti Hoya Hoite Krishna Prapti Hoya Hoite Guru Mukha Padma Vaikya Chitete Koriyaya Arana Koriyamane Asa Arana Koriyamane Asa Shri Guru Charane Rasti Aise Uttamagati Ye Prasade Pure Sarva Asa Arana Koriyamane Asa Ye Prasade Pure Sarva Asa Sudan dilaje janmi Prabhu se Divya Gyani de Prakashito Prema Bhakti Jaha Hote Avidya Vinasa Jate Vedega Janara Charito Shiguru Karuna Sindhu Adana Janara Bandhu Lokenat Lokera Jivana Aha Prabhu Kura Daya De Amore Pada Jaya Ebeas Kushaki Bhuvana Shikuru Karuna Sindhu Adana Janara Bandhu Shiguru Karuna Sindhu Adana Janara Bandhu Lokenath Lokena Jivana Ha Prabhu Kura Daya De Amore Pada Jaya Ebeas Kushaki Bhuvana Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Sahaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Bhaskatya Desatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Pararajikachas Tarasatara Shri Shri Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Sri Haridas Thakur ki jai. Prem Shri Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasudeva Gaura Bhaktivinoda ki jai. Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Samkunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan ki jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Shri Mayapur Dham ki jai. Shri Jagannath Puri Dham ki jai. Shri Tulasi Devi ki jai. Bhakti Devi ki jai. Ganga Maya ki jai. Jamuna Maya ki jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda ki jai. Nitai Gaura Premanandi. All glories